Hello everyone, welcome and thanks for tuning in to this weekend edition of Jamaica Magazine. I'm your host, Adrian Atkinson. Coming up in this half hour, research services for development offered by iSense. Get health-wise and learn how to protect yourselves against diseases. And we'll help you plan an education budget. Stay with us for this informative package after this important message.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
The best indicator of Jamaica's capacity in managing the health system would be the number of beds that we have. And we have to be very careful about how we as a country loosen our measures, because very rapidly this virus could spread and the number of beds that we have could easily be used up. That would throw us into a crisis. It was not so long ago, in February, that we approached that crisis level. We do not want to get there again.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Jamaica has been making strides in the field of science and technology to support economic growth and development. In the area of research, a tiny nuclear reactor, the only one in the English-speaking Caribbean, has been an invaluable tool. We'll learn more about this on our trek over to the International Center for Nuclear Sciences.
Building reactors is expensive. That is one caveat in other countries having them to begin with. Jamaica was fortunate in that we had a predecessor, Professor Gerald Laylaw, who had contacts both within the government as well as in international agencies who funded the construction of this reactor in 1984, when the reactor was commissioned. We've been fortunate to use it for so many good works that Jamaica has benefited from since and will continue to benefit from in the future.
This nuclear reactor that we're discussing today is the Slowpoke 2 Research Reactor, located at the International Center for Environmental and Nuclear Sciences in Kingston. It is the only one of its kind in the English-speaking Caribbean.
Strange, not many people know that. It's not a power reactor, we don't generate electricity. It's a tiny reactor and compared to what you might have seen in the movies, actually. Our reactor is just 20 kilowatts, so think about it like 20 tea kettles in your house. That's the amount of power that it has. So it's definitely not power and definitely not going to cut your light bill right now. But what we use this reactor to do is research.
This is very important for us Jamaicans, as nuclear techniques have been applied to study a range of topics from health to agriculture and even climate change.
How the reactor works, it's a device that basically generates neutrons. These neutrons are generated through a process called fission. Fission is basically when the atoms split. So every time those atoms split, it's generating heat. We have a thing in the reactor called a control rod. So think of it like a flashlight. If I put that flashlight on my hand and it's on, you're not going to see the light. That light in this case represents free neutrons. As I lift that light, in this case the control rod, then I can see more glow. That's more neutrons available. And the more they interact is the more they split, and it's a controlled reaction that occurs in the reactor. When you think about power reactors, that heat that's generated is what's used to, propel steam turbines and create energy that we would use as electricity. But in our case, since we're not using it for energy, what we're using it to do is basically irradiate the sample that you give me. So if you come to me as a client and you're curious, what's in my plant or what's in my soil, I basically expose your soil or plant to these free neutrons and it gets irradiated. Once you give me your sample and I expose it to radiation, it becomes radioactive. Since it's radioactive, it's basically going to start decaying over a period of time. When it decays, it has these unique gamma rays, which we can pick up on our detector right here. Those unique gamma rays there can tell me how much of what is in your sample. If you're curious as to how much arsenic is in your plant or how much arsenic is in your soil and chromium, that's the information that I'll be able to provide. The number may or may not mean much to you. How that relates is to regulatory policies that are set by agencies that are not us. For example, NEPA or even the World Health Organization. They have limits that are set for lead in soil or lead in plants or lead in water. What we can do is do our analysis and provide a result so that you have an idea of what you're working with, whether as someone going into agriculture or you're thinking about exporting. So this entire lab is a part of the whole process. When I get a sample and it's prepared, we package them in these polyethylene vials. That's what we use to send to the reactor. If you think about it like when you go to the banks in the States and you put your money in this tube and you shoot it to the teller, in this case the teller is the reactor. We do the same thing here, but they're much tinier vials.
This nuclear reactor and its value to the research field is part of what is helping to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.
We continue to follow the sciences, now looking at data showing close to 30% of Jamaicans having so far taken on the responsibility of getting vaccinated. This, of course, gives enhanced protection against the coronavirus. Data collected so far is also providing evidence that vaccines are indeed effective at preventing or reducing hospitalization and deaths related to COVID. The Minister of Health tells us more about that next.
We have had one-on-one interactions, we have had these press briefings, we have had articles and advertisements, we have had community outreach. I've been to almost every community where there's an outbreak, speaking to people, the healthcare workers on the ground, the 1,500 temporary workers, and we have sought to overcome every objection raised. Impotence, fertility, chipping the vaccine, all the things that have been raised as concerns, whether it was too soon to discover whether this vaccine is healthy or not. We have offered the brands that people prefer, but nevertheless, so many persons have chosen not to get vaccinated, and we have vaccines in stock. I want us to look at this and really pay a little attention to it, because it is so significant in what it is saying. It is saying that the deaths that we have had that are COVID related, 98.5 for all intents and purposes, 99% are persons who were unvaccinated. They decided for whatever reason that they were not going to be vaccinated. Well, this is the evidence for you. COVID-19 and the worst impact, not necessarily whether or not you get the virus, because we're all susceptible to the virus, but what happens after you get the virus. Hospitalization and the most extreme death is largely, overwhelmingly, almost exclusively linked to persons who are unvaccinated. And I don't know if that this chart and if this message can be any clearer. You run a significantly higher risk of dying from COVID-19, particularly if you have other complications, if you do not have your vaccine. 98.5%, 1,993 of 2024 deaths related to COVID-19 are unvaccinated. 0.7% partially vaccinated. That's 14 of 2024. 14. That means they have had one dose of a two-dose series. And the 0.8 were fully vaccinated. That's 17 of 2024. Again, very, very clear. Now, I have not dissected why that 0.8% or 17 have died or have had a COVID-related death. Maybe they had significant complications, more than likely, and those complications were too significant for the immunity or immune status that they had to overcome the COVID virus. But the facts are the facts. The majority of persons who have passed are linked also to having an unvaccinated status. And I think that's so important. So I want to remind the public that even in this fourth wave, you do have an opportunity to get vaccinated. Some 250 access points, 7 days a week to receive any of the 4 available vaccines that we have so that you can protect yourself even if you are exposed to the virus.
All children deserve positive parenting. Why not pamper us? Be patient with us. Make time to teach us and, of course, play with us. Celebrate milestones with us and don't forget to be our #1 supporter. Do all these things and practice positive parenting today.
Viral diseases are usually highly contagious. Hand, foot and mouth disease is no exception. In our next feature, we learn about how it spreads and how we can protect children who are the ones mostly affected.
Viral illnesses continue to feature prominently among the disease burden of the world's human population. These viral diseases, which usually spread from person to person, are considered contagious. Some may cause serious sickness and death, while the effect of others may be mild. For example, the hand, foot and mouth disease, HFMD for short.
Hand, foot and mouth disease is caused by a family of viruses called enteroviruses. And once we get those, they can spread through coughing, sneezing, through the infected stool and blisters that children may have. Infants and young children, usually less than 5 years old, are more likely to get this disease. However, older children and even adults can also get it.
HFMD can also spread through close contact, such as kissing and hugging. Initial signs of the disease include a fever, poor appetite, sore throat, and a feeling of being unwell. These symptoms generally last for 1 to 2 days before a blister-like rash appears on the hands, feet, and in the mouth. The rash initially emerges as small red spots, but then develops into blisters. The blisters may develop on the gums, inner cheeks, and tongue, and patients may complain of mouth pain and a sore throat. Young children tend to drool and avoid swallowing and may refuse to drink or eat because of the discomfort. This can lead to dehydration, the main complication of the disease in children.
The symptoms in adults are pretty much what we see in children. Now, the complications are not as obvious. Well, certainly dehydration. Adults can go and get fluid through their thirst mechanism. So we don't see that a lot.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness has been proactive in its surveillance and ensuring the public and stakeholders like the early childhood institutions and daycare centers are aware and able to respond effectively. The ministry recommends that children with this illness be pulled out of school, nursery or daycare until they are better.
You get infected and you show signs of the disease maybe 3 to 5 days. And then the course of the disease is about another 5 days, 5 to 7 days. Some persons it may be a little longer, and of course in others it may be a little less. We want them to stay home because we know how easily this disease can spread. They are advised to take, of course, their paracetamol, acetaminophen. Mommy or daddy may consider tepid sponging. But if the fever is persistent, it's high, you're not being able to control it, if the child is dehydrated now, there is very little urine, the tears are not there, there is no more saliva, then the child is dehydrated. And those are signs that you would take the child immediately to a health facility.
Measures used to reduce the spread of COVID-19 are also useful for preventing hand, foot, and mouth disease infections.
It's all about keeping the environment clean and preventing further spread. So we continue to advocate for the washing of hands frequently and thoroughly prior to meals. Of course, if it's the young child and you're changing the diaper, it is the secure disposal of the diaper, washing hands, cleaning and disinfecting high traffic areas and surfaces with soap and water.
Early childhood school administrators should ensure that toys and high-touch areas are regularly cleaned and disinfected, as should parents at home.
It's the same high-touch areas, all of the toys, everything would need to be cleaned properly. You wash with soap and water, you use your bleach, usually your 1 in 10 dilution to wipe down surfaces. Of course, some of the things, it's dependent on the manufacturer, what cleaning agent you are able to use.
In rare cases, the virus which causes hand, foot, and mouth disease can lead to a medical emergency.
There are, however, some very rare complications that persons may experience. Viral meningitis, which is an inflammation of the covering of the brain, or even an encephalitis, which is a inflammation of the brain itself. But those are very, very rare conditions with hand, foot, and mouth.
Prevention of diseases is important to our well-being. So we must always be vigilant for this and other viral disease, practice good hygiene, and stay in good health.
We have to remain vigilant against the spread of diseases and ensure the health of our children. Providing them with a solid education is also important to their well-being, growth and development. Watch this next feature for some tips on making a financial plan for your child's education.
Hello everyone, I'm Xavier Campbell, an educator, financier and entrepreneur. Education is very important to our development and can take years to achieve the highest level. It is also very costly, and some persons will have a difficult time finding the money up front, especially in the absence of careful financial planning. So, within the next few minutes, I want to share a few steps that will guide your approach to financing your child or children's education. Let's start with, when should we begin that financial planning? According to the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Although there is no perfect time to begin planning for your child's tertiary education, starting as early as possible is the best way to ensure you are prepared financially and avoid the common pitfalls. Having a step-by-step plan is the best way to ensure that you are able to finance your child's education without sacrificing your personal financial plan. There are several things to consider when planning for your child or children's education. However, most notable among them are Parents must identify the future costs of tertiary education and have a clear sum in mind of what their target will be. Then work their way backwards to present and see how best they can earn to realize the future goal. A clear financial plan should be put in place either by the parents themselves or with the help of a professional financial planner. The discipline is what follows the plan to ensure that all financial objectives are being taken care of in terms of allocations and meeting the various timelines set out by the plan. Once all incomes and expenditures remain in accordance to the plan, by the time your child reaches maturity, their tertiary education funding would have been readily available to offset the costs associated. Now your options could be savings or investments. Both are good, but let's look at them closely. There are basically two ways to make money. One, you work for money. Two, your money works for you. So savings is the process of putting aside a portion of your income for future use. In this case, we're talking about education. So if you're going to save, you need to put aside some of your income to ensure that you're able to offset the cost of your education in the future. While investment is you putting money aside that will generally earn interest over the period of time that you put it aside for. Therefore, having a plan inclusive of savings and investments can put parents in a better position to offset the future expenses of education. Firstly, if you're not financially literate, I would advise you to seek assistance from a professional financial advisor to ensure you are getting qualified advice that will help you achieve your goal. Here are the 5 steps of planning your child's education. Step 1, set target date. Step 2, find current cost of the education. Step 3, find target amount. Step 4, estimate the returns you can generate. And step 5, calculate the monthly contribution. Here are some additional things to consider. A partner plan is a very good thing. Creating a savings account and/or fixed deposit. Invest in one of the various educational products available from a preferred financial institution. And maintain your discipline while ensuring that the projected amounts are allocated at the appropriate time to achieve your financial goal effectively and efficiently. One of the most common mistakes that parents make is that they think that they need this large lump sum. But as the Jamaican proverbs go, every mickle make a muckle, so therefore they can start small and then build onwards. Now another mistake that they normally would make is the fact that they think that savings alone would help in terms of offsetting the costs in the future. What I would recommend is for them to use a culmination of both savings and investments in order to achieve their financial goals. So the first disadvantage I want to speak about is the inability to set financial goals. So you not being able to set goals will also lead to you being demotivated and lack the knowledge that is required to achieve that goal. And as a result of that demotivation and that lack of knowledge that is required, then there is no direction. So we consider it to be a lack of direction, right? And if there's a lack of direction, then what will happen is that poor financial outcomes will be the result of that. In concluding, planning for your child or children's education is not just dependent on the numbers. Rather, it's a combination of several factors, namely social, personal beliefs, religious, your way of approaching, and general outlook at life. However, the cost of education on a rise. Parents are looking at various investment vehicles to secure their child or children's future. Judicious planning for your children's future is essential, and empowering them with an education plan is a wise thing to do. Start to reap maximum benefits very early. Create a sustainable future for them to bloom in.
it's absolutely critical that we receive the vaccines. You will see hospitalizations and indeed deaths likely come down. And so there is a lot of value to be gained by getting as many vulnerables on board as possible. So tell your mothers, tell your aunts, listen out for yourselves if you're over 60, and take the vax, because the vax is what will help you to guard against the COVID virus and indeed help your relatives, your friends, those who you come in contact with for the same benefit.
We continue to look at nurturing and development support for children, and this final leg of today's Jamaica Magazine journey comes with tips for better parenting.
Parenting can be very frustrating, and a lot of times people don't feel like they really have an answer to everything, and the truth is that that is the reality. But there are different things that people can try. We're not saying that any one thing works for everybody or that you'll even get the outcome that you want immediately. Especially when you're dealing with young children, you might have to try something several times before you see a particular result. So for example, if it is that you want a child to learn the difference between right and wrong, a lot of times in the past we use pain to teach that this is wrong, right? But we find that ultimately when you hit a child, what you're teaching them to do is, when I don't like something, I should hit and I should lash out. What you want to try in a situation like that, you can try removing privileges. If there are things that the child might love to do, or even the age-old timeout, you know, where you say, listen, for this period, you have to sit by yourself, there's no communication, there's no talking, sit down and be still. Sometimes you have to physically just hold your child and help them to breathe through it, because you have some children where they have so much emotion and so much anger and they want to get it out that it's really difficult for them to regulate it at such a young age. And so you have to physically hold them, put your hand on them, help them to breathe through it until they're calm. And with children, even if they don't understand necessarily the big concepts of right and wrong, they can sometimes understand tone. Right? And tone is not the same thing as lashing out and using certain words and calling them different names. Tone is being firm and saying, I do not want you on this. So for example, if a child keeps going up on something, you might have to take them off it 10 times, right? And continue to reinforce with the same tone and consistency that you do not want them on this. And also for younger children, sometimes you have to be the one to remove whatever it is that you don't want them to interact with from the environment, right? Because they're so young and so impulsive, you can't necessarily leave it to them to understand I shouldn't touch this thing, right? So that's how we deal with the younger children.
And that brings us to our final stop on today's journey through the pages of Jamaica Magazine. Thanks for your company. Be sure to join us again tomorrow. Until then, keep watching this and other programs on the JIS's YouTube channel. Visit our website, jis.gov.jm, and find us on all the major social media platforms and through our mobile app that's Android and iOS compatible. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Adrian Atkinson, reminding you to protect yourself and others against COVID-19. Get vaccinated and maintain good hygiene practices. Wear your mask in the presence of other persons and do stay safe.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.